Hi, you're listening to Boggy Talk, Faith Conversations in the Mud, a resource of Church on Bayshore. Boggy Talk is recorded on Boggy Bayou in Niceville, Florida, and is hosted by Justin Wyatt and James Ross, pastors at Church on Bayshore. We typically want every matter of faith and life to have crystal clear answers, but it isn't always that easy. This podcast digs in to help Christians think with a kingdom mentality about topics that sometimes get muddy and bog us down. So let's dive in.
What's up, Boggy Talk Nation? I've been sitting on that one. How you doing? We hope you're doing well. Thanks for joining us for Boggy Talk as we continue in this series, Resolved, talking about all the things and all the ways we try to improve ourselves, make goals and resolutions. We're going to continue that conversation, but before we do, I'm going to say hey to James Ross. How you doing, man?
Hey there. I'm just so glad to be a part of the Boggy Talk Nation.
Boggy Talk Nation.
When you think of Boggy Talk Nation, think less of like United States of America or Brazil or even Germany. Think more like Micronesia or, some like tiny, I don't know if that's real, but some tiny, like one of those little island nations.
One of those countries that you didn't even know was a country. So you're like, oh, that's a country?
Yeah. And then if you try to approach, they throw spears at you.
Maybe more of a territory.
Our Boggy Talk Nation's a little angsty, don't you think?
That's right. Probably so because,
it's because of you. It's because
I'm
you get
so
them fired
mean.
up.
I get all fired up and get, like to stoke the fires and get people, say controversial things.
Yeah, man. How are you doing?
Doing all right. Like we're towards the end of January and, for all of us, reality set in. I think I'm family-wise still riding a little high that Georgia actually did win the national championship, though you doubted. So we're going to just bring that up because it may be another 40 years before it happens. Yeah. So we're just going to bring it up every now and then. I know
people are listening to the podcast because several people mentioned that they heard my false prediction.
Your false prophet.
Yeah, my false prophecy.
Anyway. The Braves and the Dogs winning in the same year, it's almost a little too much. But it's not actually. So it's great. Yeah. So, last week on Boggy Talk, we talked about our health goals, and we recorded that a few weeks ago. And so, hey, how are those going for you, buddy?
Great, man. I'm doing well. Yeah, I'm still drinking
lost 60 pounds? All right, you don't need to lose 60 pounds.
I have lost 7.5.
Way to go.
So that's pretty good. It goes slower.
It does go.
In my 30s, sorry, I don't know how it goes in your 40s, but still goes slower in my 30s.
It slows down too. And if you don't know, he is holding up the biggest water bottle you've ever seen in your life.
Well, I had that gallon bottle, and I set it down and it shattered. So I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not supposed to have a gallon one. It was kind of cumbersome. People kept making fun of me anyway, so you know me. I'm really driven by people mocking me.
Yes, that's right. It gets under your skin much.
Yeah. Anyway, but yeah, how are your goals going?
The health-wise, doing all right. So I've mentioned doing this challenge, and that is, accountability helps, which is good. And so, as of yesterday, was down 10 pounds. And
wow,
I was.
That's better for you because you're not as fat as me. So
that's 10 pounds. and I'm older, so it does go slower. That's but I think too. It's been good because I feel like I have a little more energy and just sleeping better.
And you're doing the Bonhoeffer challenge where you only eat bread and water, right?
Only bread and water. Bible. That's right. The word is my food.
Okay.
I think that's helped. And so that's good. I hope I can keep it up. I think, anytime you do something like this, like the first few pounds, it's just all the junk that your body's been holding on to. So it's not like necessarily true weight.
In my fairness, I waited till a few days after the holidays to first weigh myself because I knew I'd lose like 10 pounds the first day. So maybe you cheated.
That's right. No, I waited. First weigh was on the 4th. So
all right, fine, you win.
That's what's going.
Dang it.
But hey, I hope yours are going well. Hope you made some goals. Hope they're doing all right. And today we are talking about really the second type of goals that people make, the second most popular or prevalent kind of goals that people make. And you've probably made these before, maybe this year. We have, and that's goals related to our personal development. And this is like the goals that we all make to like be more organized or to learn a new skill, or I want to take up a new hobby. People like to decide.
Spelunk.
I don't know.
Spelunking.
Is there anywhere you can spelunk in Florida? There are caverns. Can you spelunk
caverns,
there? Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Or to read more. So we're going to talk about that. So the question is, I guess, is why are these the goals that people make? Like after health, this is the number 2 type of goal that people make. Why is that? Let's pontificate.
Well, I was thinking that there's some people who we hear we're going to talk about this and are like, yes. this. And then some people are like, no,
I'll skip till next week.
Yeah, right.
I don't need to be more organized.
Yeah, I mean, I think a variety of reasons that people make this goal. Sometimes it's because things are spiraling out of control, and so you want to get some kind of order to your chaos. I think some, know that, hey, steps need to take to meet goals. Often we're exposed to people who are better than us at meeting goals, like Justin is for me. And so we know really. we got to get more organized and things like that. So I think it's sometimes it's because somebody told us we suck.
You're bad at this.
Yeah.
And
we're tired of fighting with our spouse
or your spouse or your boss or a coworker or a friend who's just like, hey, you should probably think about.
Or we watch, what's that show? The Tiny Joy or Getting Ready, Sparking Joy or whatever.
I don't know, but I know,
Choosing Joy.
It's Marie Kondo. The way you fold your clothes and get ready to spark your joy.
Yeah, okay. Tiny joy. Right. I don't know what that means. I was thinking tiny houses mixed with having less stuff. I don't know. So, we watch something like that and we think, we see Magnolia Farms, and we're like, oh man, I can easily be like Chip and Joanna Gaines. I mean, we don't have $20 million to do it. But
right.
So
agreed. And I think we're constantly like we constantly see people who seem to have it all together because they share that and we're bombarded with that. And I think too with that, there's like people are we're more confronted now than ever because of media, that just how much we need to get our act together. But I also think we also excuse it more now than ever too. We're like, oh, that's just not me. I'm not that way.
Bless this mess.
Bless this mess. If you have that sign at your house,
you're not my wife. That's for sure. Anyway,
how about clean this mess?
Yeah, I know. Yeah. God has blessed this mess. He's giving you 2 hands. Get to work.
We do.
I don't say that because.
No, because she'd be like, you got 2 hands too.
Yeah.
Christy Ross would
My other personal goals will not be met if I.
That's right. That's right. So how does this happen? I think, and why do we fail? Well,
does it matter?
Does it matter? Does it matter to be more organized? I think, yeah. So if you go back, a few weeks ago, we talked about the macro and the micro goals, these transcendent goals. So if our transcendent goal, if you're a Jesus lover, if you're a Jesus follower and you want to seek first the kingdom of God, do you have to be organized to do that? Well, you don't have to be the most organized, but you probably need a plan. We talk about these goals, and it's not about becoming a different person, but it's about maximizing the margin in our lives to be the most effective we can. So I would say personally, on the organization scale, from 1 to 10, like 10 being a Michael Van Sant, who is like so organized, or a Steve Renna, who he has everything cataloged in his brain. To a 1 being I can't even spell organized. I'm like,
thanks for not mentioning any of our staff members.
Any other staff members. I'm like maybe a 6, like decently organized, but somewhat scattered at times.
Am I safe to? I didn't say this in Justin's performance review or anything. Am I safe to say that you're probably not naturally the most organized because you're a creative type, but
But I value it and I need it.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So it's like a learned, like I need to be like this because if I don't, I've learned that if I don't have certain things managed, then I don't have like the brain space or capacity to do what I need to do.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah. So, I would say I'm similar. I mean, I think
you're a little more organized.
A lot of people think I'm organized. I think I'm.
It's because you're direct. And so
administrative. So I think that I think about where things need to go and how to get there. But then if you have vision level and there's a lot of people in our profession who are very vision, creative thinking, then the next level will be administrative where you're strategic. And then the next level is organized. So that's probably administrative. I'm probably messing up the words, but I'm not there. And I mean, thankfully at our church, we have staff who I'm like, I really don't know how to do that, or all that entails. But so, and I've had to learn a lot. I've had to learn a lot if I want certain things to not be just a mess, then I got to be more organized.
Yeah, it takes intentionality. I think that's where we like tend to like be like, I have to be perfect in this. And like, no, you just have to like figure out who, like how you're wired and what do you need to do to continue in the calling that God's given you. And then when we set goals for this, what does this look like? Because I think what happens is that, you go throughout the year, you finish Christmas, it's crazy. And some people are like, I'm going to change everything about my life in January. And you get someone who's on this scale of 1 to 10, who's a 6 or a 4. And you're like, I'm going to be a 10. And that's just not realistic because it's not going to happen overnight. So how do we make these goals? I would say first is just don't be drastic and be realistic and realize like success in this is faithfulness over time. And I think we want change in whether it's organization or learning something new or being disciplined in our learning in and of itself is like it's gonna happen. But I would say, hey, it's really a series of a million little choices, being faithful in the small things that kind of lead up to this place where we want to be. So question for you, Mr. Man, is Mr. Man.
Mr. Man.
I don't know how I said that. I said to my kids, hey, Mr. Man.
I just want to see Sam's smirk on his face when you call him Mr.
He doesn't. He just rolls his eyes.
Okay,
whatever.
Yeah.
What does this look like for you? So how does like these personal development goals? How do they flesh themselves out for you this year?
Well, can I back that thing up?
Back that thing up.
Okay. So first, I would say that again, probably based on your environment you grew up in, you're going to default to more of the people person and, feel it in the moment person. Like I know people who truly don't want to make plans. I don't know how I'm going to feel in that moment. And that's okay. And then you have the people who are more like, hey, my house is going to be spick and span and, we're going to be on it and an agenda and you can like, vacations look different for those two types of people. So I do think to the people who struggle with being more organized, I think you need to realize that organization matters because people matter. So, the reality is, whether we make a plan or not, there's going to be results that come from our decisions and our actions, and no decision really is a decision.
Right.
I think that
That's right.
I think the reason we try to be more organized with our life, and it's hard for me not to put my leadership church hat on, but a lot of people even and maybe this is a sidebar, kind of have problems with like the structure of church sometimes and organization. But the reality is like, if we care about people, then there has to be some organization, and there has to be volunteers and scheduling and all those things. And it's really, there becomes a point in our feeling it in the moment where it's very arrogant if other people are in our life to not actually have plans and not make any commitments.
Yeah, because then they're waiting on you to decide how you feel in that moment without,
Yeah, and not make any commitments. Like, okay, so like, and most of those people have expectations still. So like, we'll use the church and then we'll get to the family life. Like, there's people who like don't want to make any commitments because they want Sunday. Like, I don't want to volunteer for children's ministry. I don't volunteer for what? Because I don't know how I'm going to feel. That I don't know if I'm going to go to church that week. I don't know what I'm going to do. But then if you come, you expect. There to be people to hang out with your kids. You expect whatever. And I'm like, that is so selfish that you won't willingly cooperate with more administrative people who create a schedule for whatever it may be. I'm using low hanging fruit. And then the same in our house. I think like, you have other people who depend on you, who have expectations, who have things they need to get done. And basically, you also have expectations. So if you're never communicating and never planning, but then you expect things of other people, I think that's very selfish. And ultimately, to a further degree of maturity, I think that, you've got to care about people enough to think ahead. And I really think so much of this is just about thinking ahead.
Yeah.
And then doing the things that are necessary for whatever is ahead. You know what I mean?
What's funny is you're saying that. I think I'm kind of cracking up because I think most adults, so I'll use our kids as an example. So as we're talking about like the organization of a family, we have chores and there's things that and every day, every morning, one of the kids, it's their job to like do the dishwasher, like unload it so that the causes, we can then do the dishes. Because if we miss a load, man,
8 people in your house,
there's so many dishes, and like the default will be like, well, I'll just do it after school. No, you have to keep the system going. You got to do your part.
Yeah.
And so as a parent, we're teaching to this children because I want them to think through that. Like, if I don't do my part, then it's a chain reaction and everything falls behind. And so as a parent, we're like, yeah, we should be teaching this to our children. But so many adults want to teach that to their children, but not affect it out in their own lives. Like when you talk about whether it's in a family or a church or even at work, like that's somebody else's job. Well, hey, what you're doing is you're clogging the system.
Yeah.
And it is kind of this self-centered, like, I want to do it when it's convenient for me. Like, and I think that's like that forward planning and thinking and being organized is ultimately like we want to posture ourselves to advance the kingdom.
Yep.
And so this is a piece of that.
And you don't have to be the, Steve Renna's or Michael's who, if you're not wired like that, who think through every detail and all that, but you do need to think ahead. I think there is an epidemic. That's not the right word in these days, but
not a pandemic.
Plagued. I don't know what word to say. So whenever I started driving, I had to print out a map.
Yeah.
To MapQuest to go where I wanted. Now, before me, you had to
it was like
take
7 pages. Yes.
You had to take the giant map. But, if I knew I was going to go somewhere, I didn't know how to go there. Like, I had to think ahead. I'm going to go here. Right. I got to go on, print directions. Then probably 5 years after me. So millennials. Mm-hmm. And I'm an old millennial, or a zennial, depending on who you talk to. They hopped in the car and started going, and they could even wait halfway until. Yeah. And I do think that we see a ton of people, probably 35 and below, who really did not have to think ahead like previous generations, and it really has hurt effectiveness. Not, everybody, but it has hurt the effectiveness of those who their parents didn't intentionally equip them to think ahead. And I think it causes a lot of problems in every organization, honestly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think too, it's making space with the little things so that we have time and energy and like mental capacity for the big things. I think for myself, like practically, like there were just going into this year, I realized like there were some like bigger things that I really have wanted to do for a while that I just haven't had time, or I haven't made time for. So I was like, I'm not going to say I haven't had time. I'm going to start saying I haven't made the time to give priority to this. And so I decided, here's some little things that I need to do. Yeah. And so for me, like calendar wise, personal, like just for work, I basically went through my calendar for the year and cleared off an entire day, 1 day a month, to give to some long-range planning. And I said, I'm going to go ahead and do this now. I'm going to not be in the office. I'm going to get away so no one can interrupt me. I'm going to organize my time the week before, so the things that I have to do daily, like, because if I don't do this, I'm not going to be in a place where I can be thinking ahead. I'm going to be constantly like, because part of my job is like, when you have a job or where it's like you have to produce something every week, like whether it's a sermon or service or group, like you often like you're so focused on getting everything done for that week, you're not thinking ahead. And I just like, I have to do this. And then, at home, it was like, we just decided, hey, like, even little things like not allowing clutter to build up, like, how I stay on top of laundry for myself is like, that's a piece of this. So it's basically deciding like, what little things do you need to go ahead and do so that you can get to the big things that gives you the space to do it. So for me, it was that. And then also not trying to do all this at once. Like one of my personal goals like this year was to spend more time doing some writing and some songwriting specifically. Whether or not anybody ever hears any of this, if it'll actually be good enough, I don't know. But I've done some of this in the past, and I have not made time to do it. But also it's like, I can't just decide in January to make time to do this with everything else I have to do. So the bigger goal is like, let's get things set up in January, February, schedule-wise, so that like in March, I can say, okay, now I'm dedicating this time to do that. Yeah. So it's like it's taking baby steps to get where we need to get. That's
good. And by the way, let's follow up with Justin on the songwriting thing. So yeah, I'll just share. I think this is just kind of along what you're saying. Some issues I think that, and I'll start with low hanging fruit to bigger things to help you grow in this is, first of all, just be punctual. And that's a big deal to me. And it's a learned behavior. I didn't value that when I was first getting started out in professional life. But honestly, whether it's volunteering for rec sports, whether it's a meeting with someone, whether it's, certain with work, is I try my best to be there early.
Yeah.
And
you're valuing other people's time.
Right. To show them I value and, them. And what's so weird is that people I think people didn't want to do that for a season in life because it would waste their time or whatever. But I'm like, we have smartphones now. Show up and play Wordscape or check your email or you know what I mean? Or Wordle.
You can Wordle while you wait.
Oh, I like that.
Wordle while you wait.
Oh man, you need to create a TikTok video.
Hey, I'm already songwriting. There we go.
There we go. Yeah, there you go. So I think that's a big deal. And I think part of it is knowing what's on the calendar and being ready. And then with that, not overcommitting.
Yeah, that's huge.
And I think that, our tendency for achiever types, and I'm an achiever type, is to say yes to so many things because you don't want to miss out on any of the things.
Yeah, you want to be there.
Yeah, and even experienced people tend to do that too, and it really just burns relationships. It exhausts you. You're not able to give your all into every situation, so don't overcommit. And then responding to people on time. Our staff hopefully follows a 24-hour rule. I need to remind them of that. But
most of the
time, you
respond
respond within 24 hours, even if it's, hey, I'll get back to you next week. And I'm not always perfect at that. Certainly if I get 20 text messages and 2 hours, I'm like, I forget. To respond to some, or you mentally think you do. Oh man, I'm a king of that. But really trying to do that, and then kind of with all that, making a calendar. And if you're married, you have our children and share a calendar with me and our spouses, with me and my wife, and our staff has somewhat of a calendar. For me personally, Charlotte, who's kind of serves as my assistant among other roles, has my calendar. So just making a calendar and sticking with it. But, and we're going to talk about money next week. It's one thing to come up with a calendar and a budget and ideals. It's another thing to actually monitor it.
Execute it, yeah.
Yeah, and I do think one thing I try to do on a quarterly basis is really look back and say how much time was spent working, how much of that time spent working was on sermon prep, with our staff, with members of our church, with X, whatever. Then how much time was I with my children, my wife, working out? I think that it's healthy to evaluate really our budget of our time. And I think that's super important. And then you said something, and I'll hand it back over to you, that's very valuable, is if you're busy, and I think most of you get to the season in your life where there's always something demanding your time. The more organized you get, the more things that come on your plate. And your plate does grow. But in order for you to have the capacity to do that and to know what to say yes and no to, you have to be a learner. Yeah. And so you have to budget time. Yeah. Calendar time for long-range planning, for personal. I hate the phrase self-care because I think that's abused. But for time where God. You're growing, personal growing, And I guess you would call that self-care. I just don't like using it because it's abused.
Well, I think you have to, and part of this is even the organization of the calendar helps us really be obedient to, to make sure we are Sabbathing, that we are taking a break, and whatever gives us rest, that we are renewing our minds and our hearts and our spirit, really to the Lord. And so this helps with that, because then we're not constantly overrun by our calendars. We're not overrun by our stuff. We aren't overwhelmed by this feeling of, all the clutter, not just, in our calendar, but the clutter in our house or the clutter in our office. That can just eventually, that can just crowd out and weed out the space that we need to mentally rest, to physically rest, and to really spiritually be renewed in our minds and our hearts. And I think that's ultimately the goal, is that, we want to do this to leverage ourselves and, for the kingdom, to help other people see Jesus. And so I would just say, what little things do you need to do, and be faithful in those little things? Luke 16, Jesus says, the one who's faithful in very little is also faithful in much. And so that's where we want to say, Lord, help me be faithful in the little, so that I can be faithful. I want to be faithful to you.
Right.
And then also just, live in grace with each other and with yourself. And when you fall short in this, This isn't your success in getting organized and being efficient or effective doesn't have anything to do with God's approval of you and your identity. So rest in that, but also be compelled by that.
Yeah. And, I talk about this sometimes on Sundays, but I want to talk about it very directly right now. So, Colossians 3:23 and 24 says, whatever you do, do it enthusiastically as something done for the Lord and not for men. Knowing that you will receive the reward of inheritance from the Lord, you serve the Lord Christ. So I love this passage because it's really like, hey, you want to give your all. And the reason you're giving your all, the reason you're trying to be best positioned is because of God. So that means that, yes, I want to be driven and ambitious and I want to do as many things as possible and grow in as many things as possible. But I need to ensure that God is the one who's guiding how I do those things.
Yeah.
And so, we live in Niceville, Florida, where there's a lot of driven, balanced, somewhat people. And, one thing that I think is often neglected by the church and by our church, our believers in our church, is how important to the local church, the early church, gathering together once a week was to keep them tethered to the Lord and keep them tethered to people who can be there for them. Because I truly believe that, to be most effective for the kingdom, we have to be really just resting in the Lord and in Christ. And, I'm just telling you that these families who are always traveling and always doing travel sports and all these things, kids are getting exhausted. They're getting exhausted. They don't even see it because they've bought into they're being marketed to by, honestly, by the people who are making money off them. And then if somebody's bought into something, they want you to come with them and validate that this is what they should be doing.
It's okay. Yeah.
And I'm just telling you that all that might be a little helpful for your kids' academic or athletic or, whatever career, but it's only a little helpful. And it's fine, but you cannot neglect the value of you being in the Word and you join together with other believers on a consistent basis if you really want to honor the Lord as a person who's driven and leading your children to be driven. And, I'm happy to flesh that with you, and through with you is what I meant to say. But, honestly, I was passionate about this at 30 because I just saw the problems with it. And again, my kids are into sports and love sports, and I'm not anti any of this. But as I approach Justin's, 40s, I'm more passionate about it. I see it as a negative more than a positive, the way it's being indulged in, if you will.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I think the older I get, the more value I see in it too. I think that is absolutely true for us. And I think it's literally like people will say, well, you're pastors, so you of course you think that people should be there. And literally that is not why. I mean, yes, that is a reason why, because you see it in Scripture and part in shepherding, you want to help people see the truth. But also it just is I would say, even personally, if we have to miss a Sunday because of sickness, I miss it and I need it. It is when the Lord tells us people to gather together, there's a reason. There is something that happens as we gather together with brothers and sisters in the Lord, with family, and exalt Him together and fix our eyes on Him. And so it's huge. And I think we excuse a lot of it, and we assume that why do we assume that this other commitment needs more priority than what we actually
Well, it's because we worship fame and we worship success. And so truly you can find in the Christian community people who say, oh, there's a 1 in 100,000 chance that my kid can make pro sports. It's worth revolving our whole life around. And it's there's a 100% chance that our lives should be lived for Jesus Christ. Why is our life not lived around that? And no offense, a quick devotional in between the baseball games, why you're worshiping that, isn't that? And I'm not saying everybody who's doing it is worshiping that. And I'm picking on travel sports because that's one that I would be more inclined to. But it's also just recreational travel. It's all these things. We are created and designed to rest in Christ and to gather with the church weekly to be refueled for the mission that God has called us to live. And if you're not passionate about that and you don't miss it, if there's somebody who doesn't have an appetite, something's wrong.
Yeah.
And I think we're like, well, I don't have an appetite for that. Okay, so you're not healthy. Let's get you health. Let's talk
that's
about
good.
that.
That's good. That's good.
So anyway, I'm done.
Yeah,
I took that one on.
Hey, that's good. So wrapping it up, the reason people make these goals is because they want to be better. But what's missing in that goal is, why do you want to be better? Like, right. I want to be better because I want to be better. I want to have.
Look at me.
I want to have a better image to people on Instagram, and people think, wow, they're so awesome and organized. No, like, we don't want to be better to be better. We want to be better because we want to say, Lord, I want to have even as much capacity as you'll allow to serve you, to honor you, and advance your kingdom. And so the question is if you make these goals, hey, if you didn't make any kind of goal like this, it's not too late. Did you know you can still make resolutions and goals in February or March or April or any month, or any day?
Don't make them in July. It's too busy. It's too
my mid-year resolution. But yeah,
I'm just kidding.
But I think that's the goal, is just evaluate now and say, hey, and then what little practical step can you take to enact this? And then, hey, how do you need to bring in accountability to that? Say, hey, share it with somebody. Say, hey, ask me in a week how I'm doing with this. Yeah. That's good. So why?
We didn't even say you could put this down too.
You can put your phone down, just like demonstrated. Yes, there, as James puts his phone down.
I think listening to Boggy Talk Weekly helps people too.
Yeah. I mean, if you will subscribe, your life will be so much better. So
the verdict's still out on that one.
Well, yeah. I realized I listened to last week, and I thought, like, sometimes I listen to podcasts at like speed and a quarter or speed and a half, just because
you can't do that with us.
I was like, I literally checked to see if I had it on speed and a half because I was talking so fast. I was like, oh, wow.
It's so funny because I talk fast, but then I'm like, oh man, makes me sound normal.
And that's why. Then I start stuttering. Anyway, hey, I hope
you don't do that on Sundays on a regular
basis. I do it sometimes.
I do.
So I hope this has been helpful. Hey, if you've got any ideas, want to add to the conversation, send us a message. We'd love to hear from you. Next week, we're going to be talking about something that everyone loves to talk about. Everyone loves to talk about it. Stacking that cheddar.
Thanks for listening to Boggy Talk. We are so glad you joined in the conversation. Go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss a beat.